Pope Francis came out and said that the decision to not have children or to have pets instead of children makes you selfish. He said that the decision to not have children actually makes you lesser. It diminishes you and takes away your humanity. Now, as someone who falls directly in the line of fire of the Pope's words, my initial gut response was to reject and dismiss everything he was saying. But I wanted to take a few days and just reflect on it and see what's there, see if there's some truth to what he has to say. Does the decision to be child-free take away our humanity and diminish us? Does having a pet instead of a child make us selfish? Is this a form of cultural degeneration as he says it is? On one hand, I do think that not having a child, that decision, is selfish. For some people, they've reflected on it, they thought about it, and they realized, parenthood is a large responsibility, and I don't think I want that. Maybe the experiences you've had in life has led you down the path to where procreating is not in the cards for you. And if that's the case, yes, that's selfish. But I totally support that selfishness. There's nothing wrong with the idea of, or the term of being selfish. I'm actually a big advocate of being more selfish. For the average person, they should be more selfish. Because selfishness is not a bad word. It's only bad if what you're doing is at the expense of someone else. But the reality is that no harm can come to an unborn child, a non-existent child. And so that decision that you're making for you is of the highest importance. There's nothing virtuous about making the decision to not have a child, but then going ahead and taking on that responsibility and bringing a child into this world just because a person of influence or a person that maybe you respect guilt trips you into doing that and taking on this whole new life that you otherwise didn't want to take on. If anything, that is an example of unethical selfishness. Because you have a person who's taking on the responsibility to bring life into this world only because of the fear of judgment of what someone else might think. In this case, maybe the Pope. Because the reality is, that fear of judgment that got you to make that decision isn't going to be the thing that's going to help you pay the bills. That fear isn't going to help you get up in the middle of the night and go feed your crying baby. It's not going to find someone to babysit the child once you're at work or you need some time off and make sure that child's being nurtured and raised properly. The fear of judgment is not going to do anything. If you watched my other video titled "To Men Who Don't Want Children," you would know just how much it saddens me when people make critical life decisions based off of what the society or cultural expectations has on them, or what other people have said to them that influences them based off of fear or a desire to be accepted. Because you have these people walking around that you're walking by every day that are living lives that are completely different from the life that they would have envisioned for themselves if they made decisions based on what they wanted for themselves, not what other people wanted for them. Let's say someone wanted to pass on the opportunity to be a parent in order to pursue, let's say the religious calling, to become a religious leader. I wouldn't pass judgment on that person or call them selfish just because they chose to follow their career path and their calling and not become a parent. But when the Pope said that not having children diminishes us and takes away our humanity, that's the one thing that he said that I can't find a way to justify. I can't get behind that. There's actually a word that I fell in love with the moment I heard it, and that word is sonder. Sonder is the profound feeling or realization that everyone, including strangers passing by on the street, has a life just as complex as your own, despite you not being specifically aware of it. The reason I share that term and definition with you is because it's my belief that the inability or the unwillingness to experience sonder is what actually diminishes our humanity. It's the unwillingness to appreciate the complexity that is the human condition that we all experience. Personally, as I was trying to define humanity in the way I see it, any action or experience that allows you to gain a deeper understanding of another life is what enriches your humanity. So for example, if you're walking on the street and you see a guy in the corner and he's sitting there, he seems kind of down on his luck. If you strike a conversation with that person with the intent to listen and to hear and understand, that conversation is what's going to enrich your humanity. I'm well aware that the experience of being a parent is like no other experience anyone could ever have. I understand that you're getting to see a life form and develop and watch a human being come into this world and open their eyes and try to understand what colors are and what sounds are and what touch and sensations are, and watch them take their first steps. Having children is an amazing privilege that a lot of people take advantage of. But it's only that, it's a privilege. It's not an obligation. And no one should be pressured or judged or ridiculed or made to feel less than for making the decision to not become a parent. If you made the decision that instead of a child, that having a pet is the most amount of responsibility that you can reasonably take on without reducing your quality of life below a point that you'd want to, all power to you. No one should judge you for that decision or make you feel like you're making a mistake. If you've went through the decision in your mind and you've thought through it and you've come out at the other end and decided, it's not for me. I feel like for some people, especially people that have never had a pet, and clearly the Pope in this situation, they don't realize that having a pet is no easy task. Like, you're raising a life. There's an extreme amount of responsibility and love and intention and sacrifice and compromise and understanding that goes into having a pet. And although of course not a human, when you have a pet, like a dog for example, raising a dog still requires you to consider and reflect on life and understand that life at a much deeper level. And that's why people love their pets. That's why you often hear people say that their dog is like a member of their family. They do anything for that dog, the way they do anything for a child. So not to compare a child's life, a human child's life, to a dog, for example, but there's a lot of crossover. And you'll be able to get that experience from anybody you talk to that has a pet that they love, that they cherish as a friend, as a family member. What actually diminishes our humanity is anything that degrades the experience of life for another being. For example, if we do something to cause harm to somebody, or if we fail to accept responsibility after we made the decision to put ourselves in a position to be responsible. For example, if a person makes the decision to take on the responsibility to have a child, but they don't take ownership of that decision and put their all into nurturing and developing that life, their child, that's of course an example of something that diminishes your humanity. Choosing to not have children, on the other hand, that does not in no way diminish your humanity, because it's not an obligation as a human being to procreate. And the decision is as complex and as unique as every single human being that one day has to make that decision, that one day has to consider whether or not they want to bring a new life into this world. Honestly, for many people, it doesn't take a lot of thought or decision to choose to have a child in a society that expects it. But it takes a tremendous amount of reasoning and consideration and personal struggle to make the decision to not have a child. How can anyone judge that? And how can anyone not respect that? And to add on to that, who can possibly blame somebody for not wanting to have a child unless they have like the utmost love and ambition and desire to have a child in the first place? Because without that desire, it hardly seems worth it. I mean, just think about it. Let's rant for a little bit here. We're living in a society that has less and less job security for the average person, and also a society that constantly has shown that they prioritize progress over sustainability. So anybody that's even remotely aware of what's going on in the world has to become more and more uncertain about what the future holds and whether or not it's for better or for worse. And you have to consider what the future generations are going to be put through. We're living in an uncharted territory here, living in a world that technology advances at a enormous level that we can't possibly keep up with, even if we were to study and read all day. Like, it's going so fast. The future just 5-10 years from now is completely uncertain. We have no idea what it's going to look like. Shit moves way too fast. And despite our technological advances, we're at a point, at least in the Western world that I live in, where you have to have pretty much a dual income, at least for the average family, in order to just get by at a reasonable level. And tuition costs are astronomical. A college degree is basically what a high school diploma used to be. So it requires a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of effort just to be at a baseline moderate level. Not to mention, inflation is constantly kicking our ass. And then you have 8 billion people on this planet, and a large part of that is an aging population that we're not even sure how to deal with from a financial point of view. And for a lot of people, they're struggling so much with the thought of how to take care of their parents, their aging maybe uncles and aunts, that they can't possibly manage the idea of juggling children with all of that unknown responsibility that they have to deal with. We're living in a world where we're living later and later and later into life, but unable to work later and later in life. So a lot of people are worried about their parents. To condemn people who choose to live a child-free life or have a pet instead of a child, it's such a shallow judgment, such a shallow and broad judgment to make over people. It's like, for someone to make that decision, they clearly are lacking the capacity to understand the complexity of life in the modern world. It's these judgments by people like Pope Francis that will lead people to be guilt-tripped into having a child and then live a life potentially full of regret and resentment. Or worse, being a half-assed parent. Because even after they had the child, maybe they realize, I really didn't want to do this. I can't believe I allowed myself to be manipulated and persuaded into it. It's not a good result to have, obviously. I really do think it's a failure of leadership, not an example of leadership, when someone has made a decision in their life and you, for maybe your own selfish reasons, looking at you, Pope Francis, tries to manipulate people into going ahead and going against, contrary to what they believe is the best decision for themselves. It's not a good look. So if you're someone who's made the decision that parenthood may not be for you, whatever your reason is, I just want you to know that you are the authority over your life and the decisions that you make. No one else gets to make that call for you. It's all in your hands. Don't allow yourself to be guilt-tripped or threatened with diminished humanity into making a decision that you don't want to make. You're the hero of your life. You're the person that writes your story. You're your own author. Do what is best for you in your life. Focus on trying to be the best person you can be and be a positive influence on the people around you and humanity as a whole. As far as we know, this is all we got, this life. We don't know what comes after. We don't know what life looked like before. So please, whatever you do, do not allow anyone, regardless of their status or their position of authority and influence, to manipulate and persuade you into making a decision for your life that doesn't match up with the vision that you have for your life. I want to thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.